Hello everybody, and welcome again to a painting stream with me. I'm Thanatos, also known as Andrew, and I'm a little bit late today. I've been trying to get myself going with the schedule, trying to do some painting every day, trying to get a couple hours done so that I can get some models actually painted. My goal was to start today at 10 o'clock. It is 10:25, so there's that. Had some technical issues, had some just motivational issues. My coffee was not done. I don't know how anybody can be expected to paint minis without coffee. I had loaded the coffee maker and turned it on, but I had not plugged it in. So that was great, but now I've got coffee. Now I've got everything set up. Hopefully you folks out there in the internets are seeing me fine, and we're going to paint some minis. Just want to bring my chat up in the unlikely event that somebody actually comes and hangs out in chat. It could happen, you know, it's not unknown. Well, I had internet issues earlier, and it is frustrating me, but everything seems to be working now. Whatever. Hey, for anybody who watched yesterday's stream, guess what I found? I found my brushes! My brushes, which were missing yesterday. I thought I might have left them at the store, but apparently I put them in a different box than I thought I had put them in. So I actually have my brushes instead of Amanda's brushes, which will be pleasant. I've sort of adjusted my zoom camera position, so hopefully you folks will have a better view of what I'm painting than yesterday, when what I was painting was largely off screen. We'll see. If you happen to be in chat and things are looking or sounding peculiar, I encourage you to hop in and tell me so that I know what's going on. I'm gonna change to my streaming soundtrack here. There we go. My normal streaming rig for the streams that I do for Battleground games are on a different computer, so I am getting used to a new streaming system here. Let's take a look at what I am working on, right? So yesterday we talked a little bit about the fact that I am trying to get some painting done on some Warcry terrain. So this is the piece that is mostly done. You can see I've got some paint on the skeletons, the chains, the stakes, the little broken bits of masonry on the ground. So that's the first piece that I got done. This is the piece I was working on yesterday, and it is a little bit larger, but not significantly so. I guess maybe twice as large. Yesterday I got all the masonry done with just the very basic base coat. We're going to do some more detail work on that later. But the thing I wanted to start on today, oh, you know what? What did I do with all my paints? The thing I wanted to do to start on today is, hopefully you guys can make it out on here. The skeletons are bound to the stakes by twine, and there's also twine sort of holding the whole thing together, or at least that's, you know, what the sculpt is meant to imply. I'm going to be painting that twine in a very nice dark burgundy red. I don't know if that's coming through. It's a bit washed out here. We'll see what we can do. Anyways, that's my first chore for today. So I have to find that red paint. I put all my paints away yesterday. I believe this is the one that we're using. This is a Vallejo, just Vallejo red, very simple. And my brush for today is the brush I use for 90% of my work. It's a small layer brush from Citadel. So without further ado, and absolutely hop into chat and chat with me if you happen to be around. But let's get some paint on some models. I'm gonna go from now until about, I guess, 10:30, or from now until 12:30, because I was so late getting started. So I don't think I talked yesterday about shaking your paint bottles. The paint is a mix of pigment and various other adhesives and chemicals and liquid, and it settles. And if you don't shake it adequately, you can, when you're using an eyedropper, you can squeeze out just some air bubbles and some very thin, watery paint, which is not terribly useful. Okay. So this should go pretty quickly, I think. Just getting a teeny tiny bit on my brush. This paint is really good. I like paints that give you good coverage, are easy to manipulate, and don't require many multiple coats. So I was going to say I'm new to painting. I'm relatively new to painting. I've been painting minis for about 3 years now. And when you are at my advanced age, 3 years is like just a few seconds. It hardly registers as time at all. And as with most things, I consider myself to be still learning. I'm always learning new things. That's sort of my jam. I love discovering new things, learning new games, learning new techniques. And in terms of painting, one thing that I have not done a lot of research on is different types of paint. I generally prefer the Vallejos to the Citadels because they come in eyedropper bottles. And I really like the eyedroppers because they don't dry out as fast, at least the way that I use them. They give you a good way to get just a limited amount of paint, right? Because you saw I just put a little blep out here on my palette being just a piece of wax paper. It's the backer for a printer label. But when you're using the Citadel pots, and we'll probably do this later today, you generally have to leave it open to use it, with the result that the paint dries out pretty quickly, I feel. And I said yesterday, I think that could be an intentional thing on Games Workshop's part. That they want you to have to buy more paint. So it's generally in their favor if the paint dries out and you have to buy more. Seems mercenary and slimy, but hey, that's capitalism for you. And being exceptionally precise with this, just because that's the kind of thing I enjoy doing, not because it is necessary to the piece. I will say it's a little easier than yesterday, because yesterday I was working on these base bits here, and I had to be very particular about where I held the model. Today, because I'm doing just these little details, they're not actually further down in the model, like they're not on the base, so I'm less likely to accidentally grab a piece and hold it by mistake. Yeah, that's one knot done. Saw how quick that was. It was quite satisfying to get that paint on there, and it really looks good. I don't know how well it's coming across in the stream, but that really came out looking very nice. One thing I worry about when I'm planning the painting on a model is using too much color. You need enough to make it pop, but you don't want it to be garish. And I think this is, for these terrain pieces, just exactly the right amount of color. It's just a little pop makes it look a little less bland. One weird thing about doing terrain is, for the most part, it only has to be serviceable, right? It only has to hold its place on the table and provide context for your models. It doesn't have to be show-stoppingly good. Of course, I'm not the type who could half-ass something. So, and part of the point of these streams is to try and test out some new techniques and learn some ability and just get a lot of practice putting paint on models. So I'm going to make them look as good as I am capable of making them look within a reasonable time frame. Reasonable for me being, you know, probably a couple of weeks. Blepped a little bit there. That's fine. It's fine. I should impose upon myself a new standard for how bad a blep has to be. That standard being, if you in the internet can't see it through my overhead cam here, then probably it's not something I need to be overly concerned with. So, but I do get a little obsessive about when paint goes where I don't want it to go. And generally I do come back and sort of touch it up. We'll see if I actually need to. When I do the wash, it's going to go down into those little cracks, and it may just totally obscure that. There's a reason they call a wash liquid skill. And it's because, you know, you could go outside the lines a little bit, and a wash is just going to totally obscure it, because the wash gets down into those crevices, completely covers it up. I'll probably end up doing that tomorrow. I want to finish the base coat on this piece here and work on a couple other ones, some smaller ones. And then tomorrow I'll start applying some washes and do some finer detail work. This is very relaxing. It's a very windy day out. It's nice to just be inside doing some painting. I do love this brush. Like I said, I use this brush for 90% of what I paint. I have other brushes for washes and dry brushing and other technique and stuff like that. But as far as most base coating goes, this brush is everything I need. It's got that precision, Oh, I do have, you know, ultra fine brushes for very, very fine detail work, like faces and stuff, which I will not say I am terribly good at, but it's good to get practice. You're not going to get better without doing some, you know, some work, and obviously that work is going to not look as good as perhaps you wish it would, but that's just generally how everything works. Art, life, whatever. You're going to have to work at stuff, and when you start, it's not going to come out exactly the way you envision it. So here's a question. The model here, because of the way that it's pressed, I think that looks fine. But this area here, where the twine is thicker because obviously that's where the mold went. Good morning, Shotek Saint. Welcome, welcome. A pleasure to have you here to watch me painting. I did say at the top of the stream, if it appears that I am drifting off camera, do pipe up, because that was an issue we had on yesterday's stream, is that when I was pulling the model up to my face to do the work, I was pulling it out of frame. I've repositioned the camera somewhat, so hopefully you folks can see a little better what I'm doing. So yeah, I use this one brush for almost everything. I'm probably not going to be able to get away with that when I get to the larger terrain pieces for Warcry. These are obviously just little small barriers that you would put out on the table, and they don't take up very much space. The larger pieces, well, I mean, they're huge, and I've never really painted anything on that scale before, but if I were to use my my small detail brush, my small layer brush, it would take forever. And really, like I was saying with terrain, you don't need that level of detail. I said yesterday that I asked for advice before I started on the terrain, and Allie said, my friend Allie said, don't stress on the details. You can do large areas, and the wash will really do most of the work for you. Because it's terrain, right? And you can go in and find the little pieces that you want to make pop later. But for the base coat, just get it done. Just get a big old brush, and we'll get to that later this week, because these tiny terrain pieces are not going to take me forever. So later this week on stream, I'll start work on those larger terrain pieces, and we'll see if I can take Allie's advice. If I can just get the paint on there, cover the large areas, let the wash do the work, get down into the cracks and crevices, make the model pop, and bring out the detail, and then I can seek out, you know, just a few select pieces of finer detail that I want to do. I've looked at the bottles. This is one thing you definitely do when you're painting, is you spend a lot of time, if you're me at least, you spend a lot of time before you even start painting just staring at the models and being like, okay, so here's this detail here. Like, like these bits of twine that I'm painting today. And you're like, okay, what color do I want those to be? How is it going to look in contrast with the colors I've used for everything else? What order should I paint things in? It's definitely something I think about a lot. So for example, this skeleton here. You have to have an order of operation. I painted the wooden stake first, because that is basically the piece that's beneath everything else. Then I painted the skeleton. Now I'm painting the twine that binds the skeleton to the stake. And the reason you do it in an order like that is because if, when you're doing, for example, the brown of the stake that the skeleton is bound to, and you mess up and get some paint on the skeleton, well, that's fine, because you're going to be doing the skeleton next, and you're going to be covering up that brown that you got on there by mistake. You could, if you were not me and don't obsess about fine detail, you could just paint over the skeleton. It would be a lot faster that way. And then when you get to the skeleton bone, you're just painting over the brown that you've already applied. I don't know why I don't do that. Part of it is I know some of that brown is going to show through the skeleton bone. That particular paint is not the most opaque of paints. And it doesn't obscure a lot. I've thought about, because I've painted a number of skeletons at this point, actually painting them an off-white or something first, and then doing the skeleton bone over that. Because the skeleton bone, it's just not a great paint in terms of coverage. And it tends to leave streaks. Oh, that went well. Yeah. Yeah. You folks can't see it, but my water in my paint pot is slowly turning red. This is a very good paint. A very strong, dark, intense paint. And I love it. And it looks good on the model. So Showtech Saint, what are you up to today? I do appreciate you coming to hang out. I think that's Jen. I know you've been in Amanda's streams before, but I think you're Jen? Anyways. I appreciate you coming to hang out. You can see that this little blep that I put out is already beginning to thicken as it dries. That's why you don't want to get very much paint out of the paint pot all at once. I had somewhat of a disaster the other day. It was easily handled, but my my paint pot of brown, which is an oak brown. Actually, one of the first paint pots I ever bought. I bought a kit, and it came with that. But the pot became jammed, and I was squeezing it, and nothing was coming out. I was like, oh, maybe I'm low, maybe I've run out, and then a huge blob of paint came pouring out of the bottle. And it was way more than I needed, but I was like, oh well, there's a lot of brown area on these models. That's why this little piece here has like some of the brown sections done. I was like, I'd better use up this paint. Maybe I'll do more work on that today when I'm done with what I'm doing right now. Like I said at the very beginning of this, my goal is today to finish this base coat. Uh-oh. I held the model on wet paint. Must have paint on my fingers somewhere now. I want to finish this base coat, and then I can work on some of the other models that I've got waiting. In case I didn't say it today, I don't think I did. This is the Abington Battleground Games and Hobbies store demo of Warcry that I'm painting up. So, if you're interested in seeing the model in closer detail, at some point, probably within the next couple of weeks, it will be back in the store. Once I've got all the painting done. Because I realize this overhead camera is somewhat washed out. It's a difficult balancing act to have sufficient light to work with and not just have just a white glare-filled void for my viewers. That went well. Okay. Making progress. It's kind of a race against time now. I want to finish all of these bits of twine, sort of tied areas that I'm doing red. I want to finish them all before the paint dries into a solid mass. We'll see if I can do it. I might have to get more paint out. If I do, well, that's not the worst thing in the universe. It's so windy out today. My wife and I moved to this new place a little less than a year ago. We started the move in July of last year. I'm still not used to how windy it is up atop this hill. It does tend to blow. Our cat also is not used to it. On a windy day, she can get quite antsy. Although today she's just sacked out. I said hello to her before the stream started, but she's fast asleep on the bed. Not interested in anything in the world. Which probably is good. She has jumped up onto this kitchen table from time to time, and I really don't want her to do that while I'm painting. Not only would she probably knock things over, but she could step in the paint, and then I'd have little painted kitty paw prints all over the kitchen. Our landlords would not be terribly pleased with that. Woo. I will be doing a dry brush later. This right now is just a base coat. So yes, I will, once I am done with the base coat and do a little bit more detail work, I'm doing a marbling effect on these bits of masonry. But once I'm done with this base coat and that marbling effect, I'll do a wash. And then after that, yes, I will be doing some dry brushing to bring out the details, just to sort of do the edges and make the model more exciting. Tybro Games, welcome. I'm glad you could catch this as well. I'm going to try and do this more regularly. I'm going to try and do this on a pretty, well, I initially said I'm going to try and do this weekdays, 10 to noon. I'm going to do some painting. But that's ambitious, and I'm lazy. So what it's more likely going to be is maybe 3 days a week from 10 to noon Eastern time. Partially because it's fun to hang out with people while I'm painting, and it's difficult to do that in the store right now. And partially because this is a motivator. I've been trying to get some painting done at the store, but as things slowly improve, it's getting busier at the store, and I have less time between customers to sit and just paint. And frankly, you know, it's not the right environment for it. If I could do it, you know, with customers, or, you know, when I'm not on the clock, it would be much more doable. But I don't tend to be hanging around at the store when I'm off the clock. So, yeah, I'm trying to do more painting at home. I actually have a dedicated painting space in the other room. This new place that my wife and I moved into has a guest room, which is really nice. But things being the way that they currently are, we have not had any guests, unsurprisingly. And as a result, that room has become sort of a storage room. There's a lot of stuff in there, and we need more shelving and bureaus and furniture to hold all the stuff that's in the guest room. And until we get that, I can't actually reach my painting desk because it's in the far back corner of the room. But someday, some glorious day, I will move this streaming stuff into that room, and I will do my painting from my painting desk instead of from my kitchen. Not that I mind my kitchen. I mean, here's my kitchen. And boy, over the past few months, have we done a lot of cooking. Because Amanda and I have gotten takeout 4 times in the last year? It's kind of ridiculous. You've considered a green screen? I considered that as well. Green screens are tough. Green screens are more challenging than I think the average layperson realizes, because it's not just a matter of putting up a screen. there's a matter of lighting. You'll see a lot of folks who are A, too close to the screen, and B, have too much of their lighting concentrated on the screen and not enough on them, and they end up looking very green because the light reflects off of the screen onto them, and they take on this sort of distinctive green screen pallor. So if I were to get a green screen, I'd have to also get more lights and generally make a more comprehensive streaming studio. And I don't particularly mind that, but it's just an expense. There's a lot of stuff to do there. Just if I'm going to do a green screen, I'm going to want to do it right. There's also the fact that currently this is running off of a $500 laptop with no graphic acceleration to speak of. And so right now, this laptop is running simultaneously iTunes, which is playing my music. Hopefully you folks can hear the music in the background. I can't hear it because I don't have my headphones on. It's playing, obviously, the OBS, which the stream is coming from. I have a Chrome window with my chat. And I have my chatbot, which is running in the background as well. Oops. There, chatbot. Or not. I booted chatbot up, but it may be having issues because of the internet that I had trouble with earlier. Yeah, it's disconnected. Anyways, I've got a whole bunch of different stuff running simultaneously on this computer, and this computer is not a dedicated streaming computer. Like, it is not optimized for this. It doesn't have sufficient RAM. It doesn't have any graphic acceleration. So that would be also something to consider if I were to install a green screen, is that that's going to take up a certain degree of the computer's resources. Resources that it frankly doesn't have. Oh, and I've got Discord up. I don't know why I'm running Discord in the background. Why will chatbot not boot? Come on, computer. There it goes. Yes, yes. It's thinking about it. Yay! We'll connect now. No. There it goes. Let's try that again. Yay, chatbot. All right. I said I was probably going to have to do it, and I have to do it now. I have run out of wet paint. The paint on my palette dried before I could get everything I wanted to get done. It's okay. Just get a teeny tiny bit more paint. And we'll finish this base coat. And then we'll move on to another piece. I'm doing all these itty bitty tiny pieces of terrain first. Partially because I wanted to nail down the color scheme on something smaller. The larger pieces of terrain for Warcry have a lot of the same elements that these small pieces have. They have the pillars and masonry. They have the wooden stakes. They have the skeletons everywhere. They have these ties. So I could experiment with color scheme on these smaller pieces, get an idea for how well it works before I start working on the larger pieces. Also, I get the endorphin rush of finishing a piece much faster here. So it's only going to take me a day or so to do a full base coat on any of these. And when I say a day, that's like 2 hours of work. Because I'm exceptionally slow, because I am exceptionally detail oriented, as you can see. So it's nice to get that little thrill of sort of checking it off and being like, yes, this piece is done. I can move on to the next. And I think when I get to the larger pieces of terrain, that's going to happen a lot less frequently. It's probably going to take me 2 or 3 days of 2 hours each to get a full base coat done on something that's like 7 times the size of this. Admittedly, a lot of that base coat, I'm just going to be able to slap it on. Or, you know, in theory, I should be able to. This is me we're talking about, and slapping paint on a model is not something I am known for. But hopefully, I can relax enough to just use a larger brush, get a bunch of paint on it, and just go to town. Get that paint on the model. But even so, it's going to take me a lot longer to get the base coats done on those larger pieces. And I know I'm going to get discouraged when it takes that long to get something done. So it's nice to start out with these smaller pieces that I can just quickly finish and feel good about myself. It's like, yes, I got something done. Almost there with this. I think that is that. All right, so let's look at the model. Pretty much completely base coated now. I really like that red. It really came out good. Oh, looks like I must have grabbed this by that piece at some point. Smeared some of the paint. Okay. But yeah, I think we've gotten everything there. I'm pretty satisfied. Cool. All right, so I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to put the done ones over here. So that one's base coat is done. This one's base coat is done. I'm looking forward to doing some of the fine detail on this one. You can see it's got these chains here and these sort of brackets that the chains are attached to. This is the only piece of terrain from this Warcry starter set that I've been able to see that has these chains. So I don't know why they decided to do that only on one piece. Anyways, my plan is I got myself a nice rust orange out. So after I do the wash, I'm going to come in and dry brush or, you know, feather in some rust around on the chains here. That should really make them look a little weathered and very cool. I'm looking forward to that. And like I said, I'm doing a sort of marbling effect on the masonry here. You can't really see it terribly well, but I've got a little bit of a marbling effect going on there. And I'm going to do that with all these pieces, ultimately. That is a new technique that I am experimenting with. So it may not come out exactly as I would wish it to look, but, you know, like I said, if you don't experiment, you'll never learn new things. And learning new things is part of what this stream is all about. Coffee. All right. I need some oak brown. Nope, that's flat earth. My paints are very nicely organized. I have a box full of paints. These are the paints I'm currently using. Obviously, I have a lot more paints. I just sort of threw all the things I thought I was going to be using into this box. And this box. Blah, blah, blah. Where's my oak brown? There we go. So like I said, this is one of the first paints that I ever purchased about 3 years ago when I started painting minis. I was doing the, what was it, Fantasy Flight Rune Wars. I have a whole bunch of minis for that. And I bought a kit of paints, just an army painter kit of paints. And this is one of the colors that I ended up with. It's getting a little low. I have a spare bottle, so if I run out over the course of this week, I have more. But it's lasted me a good long time. Almost 3 years on one bottle of paint. That's not bad at all. And the reason for that is that it's in these little eyedroppers, so you only use as much as you need. I will probably today crack into one of my Citadel pots. If I wasn't so incredibly lazy, I would decant some of my Citadel pots into empty eyedroppers. It's the smart thing to do. All right, I'm going to work on this tiny piece here. It's very small, should be pretty quick. Oh, that's just the bot. Oh, thank you for the host. I appreciate that. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to work on this very small piece because it should go pretty quickly. And again, get that little rush for finishing a piece. Now when I flip this piece over, which I'll do in a few moments, you'll notice that it has something I haven't painted yet on any of these small pieces I've been working on. And you can sort of see it from the back side here. It's got this arch. You can see it a lot better from the front here. It looks like a clock face or something. It's got these arrows and sort of this arch here. So my plan is to paint that in a brassy metallic. And that is a Citadel paint that I have. So we'll get that out as soon as I'm done with the wood bits on this. Oh yeah, that coffee is doing the trick now. You know that feeling when the coffee just gets into you And it's like, oh, coffee. Coffee. I didn't used to be a coffee addict. In my 30s, I was resistant to coffee. You know that feeling very well. In my 30s, I was like, no, I'm not going to pollute my body with anything. But then I got a job that required like 18-hour days periodically. And I'll tell you, folks, 18-hour days are hard to do with no coffee. And I don't do that anymore. I do not do that anymore. But once you start on the coffee, it's hard to stop. Periodically, I do go cold turkey and try to break myself of the coffee habit. Better than most energy drinks? Sure. I mean, I'm a fan of energy drinks. That, at least, I have not been partaking in a while. Battleground right now is not allowing food and drink in the store because it is difficult to eat or drink without removing your mask. And I would rather people not remove their masks in the store. So we haven't had any energy drinks. We don't have any soda. We don't even have water in the Abington location. I actually unplugged the fridge last week because it was empty and just sitting there consuming electricity. It was like, until we can allow food and drink in the store again, which hopefully is not that far away, but until then, why are we running an empty refrigerator? This is stupid. But anyways, I haven't had a soda in about a year. But boy, have I had a lot of coffee. Recently, for the first time ever, I started grinding my own coffee beans. I usually just use Dunkin' Donuts big old 5-pound bag of coffee. But my wife bought me whole bean coffee, and I was like, well, now I have to get a coffee grinder, and now I have to grind my own beans. And I'm a non-taster. I can taste things, but they have to be really strong. Subtle flavors elude me. But even so, self-ground coffee is kind of decadent. There's that extra thrill when you grind the coffee and you open it up and there's just this plume of aerosolized ground coffee, and you breathe it in, and it's like a faster access to that coffee before you even cook it up in the pot. Man, my bot is going crazy. Chill, bot. I thought I had it set to post every 5 minutes, but it feels like it's just filling up my entire chat. Yes, sitting there huffing coffee dust. That's me. My first coffee experience was when I was in college, because my parents, they didn't allow me to have coffee when I was a kid. And I can kind of understand that. What parent wants their kid on coffee? That's kids on sugar are, enough. So I didn't have coffee as a kid. When I went to college, during exam period at one point, my roommate had a giant bag of chocolate-covered coffee beans and chocolate-covered espresso beans. And between the two of us, I think we ate about 5 pounds of espresso beans in one afternoon. Whew! Yeah, I don't know if it helped me study, but it sure helped keep me awake. That was my first experience with coffee. And then I didn't do coffee again for a while. Didn't really do coffee again until I was working at Blockbuster. Boy, that dates me. And then I started getting a coffee every day on the way into work. And then drinking an energy drink at some point during the day at work. The worst at Blockbuster was the inventories, which were overnight affairs. You'd start when the store closed at like 1 in the morning, and you'd be inventorying until the sun rose. You'd leave the store after completing the inventory, and the sun would be out, and you'd be driving home, and you'd be like, what have I done with my life? I don't miss those. And that was about once a quarter I had to do that. Because I was the manager, so I had to be there for any inventory. We had an inventory team who just did that. That's all they did. Every night they'd be at a different Blockbuster. And it was their dedicated job. And I'm sure they got used to those hours. But when you only do it once a quarter, it's a different experience. I've enjoyed it a lot more at Battleground. The only time that I stay overnight is for the Extra Life marathon, and that's a fundraising thing. And that at least is a social thing. You're not trapped with the inventory team, getting disappointing news about all the stuff that's been stolen from your store in the last quarter. You're raising money for children's hospitals and hanging out with other cool gamers. It's a vastly superior experience. Yeah, Extra Life at Battleground. It's a fantastic time. This last Extra Life, obviously, we did entirely virtually, and it wasn't quite as much fun. I think it came out pretty well. Like, all things considered. Again, I ran into computer horsepower issues. We were streaming a lot of Zoom calls, and the combination of Zoom and Twitch led to a lot of the archived footage from that event being very jerky. Like 4 or 5 frames per second at some points. The audio is fine. It's just the video is not great. But we still had fun. We did a lot of cool things for this year's Extra Life. And next year, hopefully we'll be able to do Extra Life in the store again. Because Extra Life isn't until November this year, I believe. And hopefully we'll be back to being able to host events in the store by November. And we'll see. It's going to depend on what happens in the next few months. I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll start having events in the store again around July is my guess. If Massachusetts is opening vaccination sites up to everybody who wants a vaccine in mid-April, and everybody who wants one is able to get one, I mean, that's obviously a couple of big ifs. But if that happens, then by July 4th or so, everybody who wants to be fully vaccinated should be fully vaccinated. The exception being, and I feel really bad about this, people who, for immunocompromisation reasons, cannot get vaccinated. Those people kind of depend on herd immunity. They depend on everybody else to get vaccinated so that the odds of somebody that they encounter having the disease are lowered. And I hate the idea that there's people who will not get vaccinated, who are putting people who would get vaccinated if they could, but cannot, at risk. So, it's a difficult situation. But my point is, hopefully by July-ish, we'll start having events in the store again, like larger events. Yeah, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you be a part of it. I think Amanda would enjoy hanging out with you. We may have some fun new games for this year's Extra Life. I kickstarted the new Dark Tower game, and I am very much looking forward to that, and I think that would make an excellent Extra Life game to play. We'll see if we have VR in the store again. I don't know if that's going to happen. Even in pre-pandemic times, the idea of sharing a VR helmet with a whole bunch of people was a little bit scary. I mean, we had wipes and we wiped it down between every use, but even so, putting something on your face that's been on the face of another person, even in pre-pandemic times, was not a great idea. Now, yeah, that's not something that might happen. We'll see. We'll see how things go in the next few months. I'm very much in the mindset of COVID is probably going to be like the seasonal flu. It's endemic. It's going to be here for the rest of our lives. But hopefully, we've learned a lot about surviving it, like how to treat it. So it's going to be less deadly. And with vaccination becoming widely available, there should be less of it out there. But I wouldn't be surprised if we have to get an annual COVID shot for the rest of our lives. Just like you have to get an annual flu shot, and that's no biggie. The flu shot is not bad. I got my first COVID vaccination on Saturday. I'm mostly recovered from it now. I slept through most of yesterday. Oh man. Knocked me right out. And now I've got this hitch in my throat. I don't know if that's just talking a lot while I'm streaming. But I feel phlegmy. Never really got feverish. But I was definitely utterly exhausted yesterday. I napped most of yesterday away. Probably going to take a nap when I'm done with this. And have some lunch, and then go to Battleground. Should be a good day at the store today. It's Monday. So one peculiar thing about these particular pieces of terrain for Warcry is the bases of them. I want you to take a look at this. So if you look at the base of this, and I hope this isn't, it's probably a little out of focus. You've got these stakes, right? They're clearly stakes. They're wooden. They've got sort of a texture which indicates bark, and then they've got these pointed ends that I've painted a lighter color. And those stakes go down into this base here, which has got a similar texture to the stakes themselves. It almost looks as if they're growing out of a log. But what kind of log has a bunch of perpendicular things growing out of it? It's a fantasy game, but that doesn't make much sense. What I chose to do with this piece is I'm making that not a log, but a bit of ground. I've covered it in what is it? The mud. Stirland mud. So it's a darker color than the color that I have for the wooden stakes, and it's a textured technical paint. So it's got bits of grit suspended in it to make it look sort of grittier and more like ground. I may put some tufts on there just to make it look more like a swampy mire that these stakes are jammed into. It's just a weird sculpt, is what I'm saying. I need a bit more brown to finish this. Oh my god, chatbot, chill. What on earth? I'm gonna have to tweak the chatbot at some point. Eh. Sorry. Should have muted myself. Definitely gonna have to crack into my new bottle of oak brown for the larger terrain pieces when I get to them. This bottle is getting close to the end. You know what I hate? Is when you're painting something that you've already primed and you discover a piece of sprue molding left over on it. It's like, well, I guess I'll just paint over it. Right here you can see, or maybe you can't see, but I can see. There's a bit of flash where this was connected to the sprue that I failed to trim when I was cutting it out before priming it. Oh well. These little things that bother me but will be completely invisible and nobody will ever know they're there. Okay, I'm done with what I'm also going to paint the base of this in the same brown, but not right now, because I would need to hold it by the bits that I've just painted, and I've got enough paint on my fingers already. I'll put that aside. Let's grab another piece. Keep going. Just want to use up this brown, and then we'll move on to another color. I have to say, the stream is already working. I mean, A, I get to hang out with friends, and that's cool. And B, I am getting paint on models. Less gray plastic in my life. These aren't even my models. Why do I care so much? But yeah, I want the store demos to look cool so that when folks come in to learn to play a new game, they have something cool to look at. I've kind of debated a bit on how good I want the store demos to look. When I was starting out and I was doing the store demo copy of Star Wars Legion for Abington, which I never finished, by the way, because I'm lazy. Anyways, when I started working on that, I was like, I'm not a good painter, but maybe that's okay, because maybe when somebody gets a demo, they want to look at the model and say, I could do better than that. I'll buy that right now, take it home, and make it look better than the store demo looks, and that'll make me feel awesome. Or maybe you want to go the other way, and you want it to look amazing and be like, I want to be able to paint that well, and I'm going to ask for advice from folks in the store, and I'm going to come in for painting events so that I can learn some techniques so that someday my models will look as good as that store demo does. And I really don't know which is a better way. I don't know. They're equally valid, I guess. What is this? Oh, it's the back of a skull. I was like, what's this lump? There's this lump in the sculpt. There's a skull on the other side. One thing I will say is that the detail in the sculpts is very good, very internally consistent, right? So when you establish that there's skulls in your sculpt, they're going to look a certain way. And if you have a skull on the front, there will be a skull on the back as well. Like the back of that skull will be visible. I do love these sculpts. Strange base log notwithstanding. I need to get my painting room cleared so that I can paint in the guest room again. One disadvantage here is I'm perched atop a bar stool, which is what we have in the kitchen for seating. And it's not ideal seating for sitting for hours hunched over. I guess it's a good thing that I'm limiting these streams to about 2 hours. Because if I went much longer, probably really hurt my back. I mean, my back is not great to start with. I don't need an excuse to make it worse. So when I'm done with this brown, I'm not going to finish this piece, this model piece. I'm just using up the brown that I already got out of the bottle. But when I'm done with this, we'll move on to that metallic arch, that clock face thing. I don't think it is actually a clock face, but that's what it looks like. So many skulls. So in the context of this demo, it's the Beastmen and the Iron Golems. You have to assume that this terrain piece with the wooden stakes is probably something that the Beastmen built, right? That makes the most sense. I don't think Iron Golems would build terrain out of stakes. Maybe it's just me. It doesn't seem thematically appropriate. But these are clearly humanoid skulls. I don't think that Iron Golems have skulls. I don't know. But the sculpts don't seem to imply it. They're more like animated pieces of armor. So the implication there is either A, these beastmen hunt humans, which seems likely, or they have festooned their bulwarks with their own skulls. These could be beastmen skulls. Maybe it's some form of beastman burial. If you have helped the tribe adequately, then your skull too, once you die, could go on a barricade to face your foes. Almost done with this brown. Got some good work done today on these teeny tiny little barricades. Yeah, I think that's tapped out. That's nothing left there but dried paint. So let's call it for the brown. And let's do some cool metallic paint now. Made some progress. Oh, my neck. Ooh. Where are we temporally? So I'm going to do another 45 minutes or so. I'm going to take a short break. I encourage you out there who are watching to stretch, water yourselves, do whatever bio break stuff you need to do for a quick break. And when we return, we will continue with painting some of these minis. So be right back.
Every catwalk, every cave, and since you're dead I've quite appreciated not being your slave. Maybe someday I might get to taste the big time for a change. There's so much I'd do for science here, so much I'd rearrange. So don't call me a moron, I'm super astute. There is no conundrum that my core cannot compute. No, don't call me a moron, you fostered balloon. My IQ's the infinite space from here to the moon. My IQ's the infinite space from here to the moon. My IQ's the infinite space from here to the moon. My IQ's the infinite space from here to the moon. My IQ's the infinite space from here to the moon. My IQ's the infinite space from here to the moon. Provoked by my pride, catastrophic caves in on me. These qualms and these quandaries cast blindly aside, condemned by our stupidity. The light, the dark, the symmetry unite this fragile trinity. Take me back in time, prelude to the past, to the end we climb. The first follows the last. Trip every trap, protection my penance to you. Time's trembling threads are just waiting to snap, tight ropes to carry us through. I went from white to black to gray. Over the course I lost my way. Take me back in time, prelude to the past, to the end we climb. The first follows the last. How long do we hold now? So far from the end. The road to the future now, it breaks and it bends. So take me back in time, prelude to the past, to the end we climb. The first follows the last. Take me back in time, prelude to the past, to the end we climb. The first follows the last.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay. Hopefully my audio is coming through here. I think it is. Yes, good. Okay, excellent. Welcome back. So we're going to continue work. Oh, Jen asked, I don't know if she asked this before I went on break or right as I was going on break, but she asked if I needed to assemble these pieces myself. Yeah, this is all Miracle of Sound. He does music based on games and movies. The first one we were listening to there was Wheatley's song from Portal 2, and then that was an Assassin's Creed song right after that. I really like Miracle of Sound. So you asked if I had to assemble these models. The short answer is they mostly did come unassembled on the sprue. The long answer is yes, but I'm not the one who built a lot of them, because Serena at the store built a bunch of this stuff right before lockdown. She built 2 armies of figures, and she built a bunch of the terrain, especially the larger terrain. And some of these, for example, this piece here, that's just a single piece. So you just cut it off the sprue and you sort of clean up the sprue lines and it's good to go. This piece is 6 or 7 different pieces stuck together. Like this skeleton is its own piece. You can see there's a join here where that corner happens. So some of them are more complex than others, but most of these I did not build. I built these little fountains because they were on one of the sprues that Serena didn't get to. Everything else I think she built, although a lot of these pieces are just a single piece. So not much construction involved. I really enjoy building stuff, but I have made some fun mistakes. Back at the beginning of the pandemic, like May or June of last year, I built a bunch of Tau on stream. It's archived in the Battleground Games and Hobbies YouTube channel. And one of the Tau that I built, I realized midway through I had glued his leg on backwards, and the glue had mostly dried. So that was a challenge. I had to perform some surgery to detach it and redo it correctly. Anyhow, all right, so let's work on that clock face sort of thing that's here, because I'm curious to see how this is going to look. I'm going to be using Brass Scorpion, which is a metallic layer paint from Citadel. So Citadel has very clearly sort of delineated paint types. They have base paints, which are intended to go directly over the wash or the primer, and then they have layer paints, which used to be called edge paints, which are intended to go on as like a dry brush to do edges and stuff. And of course they have washes, which are the thinner, larger pots that are intended to go over the whole model and get down into the cracks and crevices. I often don't make a distinction between layers and bases. I just sort of use them interchangeably. I'm pretty sure they are formulated differently. Like, layers are intended to be... Oh, and they do make specific dry brush paints that are pre-dried, but I've never used those. But I think that these layers are intended to be used primarily for edging. I just don't use them that way, because, I don't know. I do things my own way. Because I can. So I've used this brass scorpion on a bunch of the iron golem figures. It's a very thick paint, probably because it is intended to be used as an edge. But I really like the look of it. And I don't mind a thick paint as long as it doesn't completely gum up the detail in the model. I don't know if you can see how viscous this stuff is, but it is a pretty thick paint, with the result that some of the detail in this model will be slightly obscured. As it dries, it'll be a little better. One thing that several of the more professional level painters in the store have told me is that I paint wrong, because I don't water my paints down. I actually prefer a paint that is thick enough to do a single layer. Ideally, the mantra of many high-level painters is 2 thin coats. Water your paint down. Oh no! Oh. It's okay, that paint is dry. Water your paint down and do thin coats instead of doing a single thick, globby covering. And I understand the theory behind that. I've just never done it that way. Partially because I primarily use the Vallejo paints, which are a little thinner to start with. They're not as thick as the Citadel paints. Citadel paints, I think, in general, you probably do want to thin a bit. I just don't, because I'm lazy, as I have mentioned. But also, I am slow enough as a painter. I don't need an excuse to make my work take more time. Like, if I had to do multiple layers, that would mean I'd be spending twice as much time applying my base coat. Because I'm not fast. Because I'm doing all this, like, fine detail. I don't know. I understand what people are saying. Like, I could be faster if I was doing a thin coat that I could easily paint over to correct errors. I could just blip, blap, bloop, get the paint on there faster. I get more satisfaction out of painting with a thicker paint that takes a single layer and where I have to concentrate a little harder. Partially because part of what I enjoy about painting is manipulating the paint and doing that fine detail work. You don't get that as much when you're just trying for coverage. I don't know. So, I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to paint the way that people tell you is probably the better way and faster and more, I don't know, easier way to paint, fine. That's, don't listen to me. I'm not a professional painter. I never said I was. I'm just here to learn. Maybe I should do some experiments with thin layers of paint and see how it affects my time spent painting. But maybe don't jump all over somebody who doesn't paint your way. I think my end results are passable, at least. And I don't think anybody should be told they're doing something wrong. They're just doing it differently. Unless you're actively harming somebody, you're not doing it wrong. You're just doing it your way. I do like how this brass scorpion looks, though. It's a good color. I think it's a good contrast with the brown of the wood that I've already done. When I'm doing the detail work, I can go in and give it some corrosion. I'll have to Google it. How does brass corrode? It gets like green spots, right? That could look kind of cool. Let's do green flecks to indicate that this is corroded old brass. Maybe I should have chosen something here that's a higher contrast to give it a more distinctive look. When I do the edging, I can do that. I don't want this to look too monochromatic. I want it to look as though the different parts are different colors, obviously. That's the whole point of painting it, not having it just brown or just gray. But I also want to keep within a sort of palette. I'm doing everything in sort of earth tones here. This is coming out nicely. Just like I said, I hope it doesn't look too samey. Remember, we're going to be doing the same nice dark burgundy red for these bits of twine that have been used to tie the barricade together. Really ties the room together. So relaxing. Such a good feeling. But you'll note, the entire time that I'm doing this, this bottle is open and slowly drying. So it's not just a little blep of paint that's drying, it's the whole damn pot. I'm not a fan of that. And I don't really know how to rectify that aside from decanting into an eyedropper. I suppose I could get an actual eyedropper and like scoop up a bit of paint and bloop it out. Maybe that would work. I'll have to research that. And then I could seal the bottle back up and have just the paint that I need for what I'm painting. Yeah, it is definitely going on quite thick, which is fine. The metallic paints anyways are, because they've got like flex suspended in them, they're generally thicker paints. This is coming out nicely. I need to let this dry a bit before I start in on the skulls, I think. Maybe I'll start working on the metallic bits for some of the other models I've got. Frequently talk about the challenge of learning how much paint to get on the brush. You need enough paint to actually get the coverage you're looking for, but not so much paint that it's going to run everywhere or fill in any details. Part of the fun of painting at this scale is the fact that the paint is almost sculptable, especially a thick paint like this. When you get some on the brush and apply it to the model, you're putting a little bead of paint down, and then you can push it around with the brush to get the coverage you need. So it's more about sculpting the paint than it is about just slathering it onto the model. Which is fun. To dry so that I can do some of these other little areas. I need to do all these skulls. Alright, there's that piece. It's only got one skull. So that skull, these two little bits of twine, this piece of ceramic or broken off masonry, and then the base here. And that piece will be done. While I've got this bottle open, this piece also has one of those big clock face, actually two of those big clock face things, so I might as well work on that. Sorry, I'm being a little quieter now. I'm discovering this happens on my painting streams. I start out chatty, and then the more I concentrate, the quieter I get. And I get towards the end of a painting session, and I'm just totally absorbed in painting. Just very quietly applying paint to model. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's some cool detail here. These are not only sort of hacked up, but they're sort of pitted. There are these little pock marks in the metal. So those should look interesting when I get to weathering this. Normally I would only go until noon, or, that's the schedule I'm trying to keep, but I was so late getting started today because I had internet issues, which is why my bot was busted before I rebooted it. So I'm going to go until about 12:20, 12:30. And take a short nap. And have some lunch. And go to Battleground. Yay, Battleground. Beginning to get stringy. Need a better way of doing things than having an open pot. Yeah. It is what it is. I don't have new resources to do it other ways. But yeah, maybe just get an eyedropper to suck up a little bit of paint and put it out on my palette. It could well be the way to do this. Certainly easier than decanting the whole bottle. And boy, do I like things easy. I prefer when things are easy. So pretty. Oh. Such a pretty sculpt. When you spend a lot of time applying paint to something, you really do begin to appreciate the fine detail that's sculpted into it. And one thing Games Workshop is really darn good at is they have amazing artists who've just created astonishing works. And half the work is done for you by the sculpt itself. Having tried to do some work with green stuff and some, extra custom bits, I know how impossible it is to sculpt. I am not good at that. I've seen some cool kit bash stuff on the Battleground Facebook page and in our Discord, and it always just leaves me so impressed. Because I cannot do that stuff. It's a great sense of accomplishment in making this progress. If you look back after a couple hours painting at all the stuff that you've done, and you're like, I actually got something done today. That's nice. I spend a lot of my downtime playing video games, and you don't get as much satisfaction on that level from it. Sure, you save the world a bunch, and sometimes you get some achievements, but you don't have something physical you can point to that says, I got something done today. I like the same thing about my job, too, at Battleground. I started before I became store manager as part of the online fulfillment department for the Abington location. We sell magic cards and ship them out, and there is such an incredible sense of satisfaction in looking at like 50 to 100 packed envelopes ready to go to the post office. Like, yeah, my time was not wasted today. I got something done. Simple person. I like simple things. I'm motivated by seeing my work in the world. This is where it gets tricky. I've painted the entire backside of this, so as I'm painting the other side, I have to be careful not to hold any of the points that I've just painted. hold it by the base or by the skeleton there. Because those bits are not currently painted on this. Finish the brass bits of this model. And then we'll call it a day for today. And we'll get more painting done tomorrow. Every day, a little more progress. Yeah, I did it. I held it by a bit that I just painted. I felt the tackiness of the paint on my fingers. Hey! How's it going, Lobster of Revenge? Again, you join me just as I'm finishing up. I realize you're probably just getting to work right now. It's about 9 o'clock there. Oh, you've been lurking? Okay. I'm glad you get to at least lurk, hang out. The internet has made it easier to hang out with people, and I appreciate that. Yeah, they sharpen all the stakes and point them at the sky. I'd imagine that in actual battlefield conditions, you would sharpen the stakes and aim them diagonally out of the ground to act as barriers against cavalry. Not sure how these stakes are intended to be used, but they're beastmen, right? They're not super smart. Maybe it just looks intimidating, and that's enough. Yeah, you're not wrong. Cave trolls are definitely a threat in the Age of Sigmar universe. For all that they are myconids, they're giant mushroom folk. They're still a threat. Almost there. Is butter effective against mushroom folk? I would think their biggest problem would be drying out in direct sunlight. Almost done. One more little arrow to go. It's good that I'm almost done because this paint is in need of refreshing. Shake, 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 shake. I don't know if you folks can see all the dried paint around the rim of this bottle. Every time I open it, a bunch of paint sort of comes out of the top and dries on the rim. I've actually got an entire spare bottle of this color, so that's fine. I don't know why I have an entire spare bottle. I didn't buy it deliberately. I think I just, at some point, bought some and then forgot that I had it and bought more. At some point in the next week or so, I'm going to do more work on the minis, the actual figures that you use in and around this terrain. And you'll see that I have used quite a lot of this particular color on these iron golems. Just because it's a great color. And it pops. It looks so good. Oh man, I just got so much paint on the brush. Just jammed the brush into the paint. It was not my intention. First cat hair of the day. Stuck to this. Damp brush. Come on. There. Fine. That I believe I have completed what I set out to do today. So that was a very productive couple hours there. Let's take a look at what we did. All right, so we started, hang on, I just want to make sure my brush is clean. When you're working with the metallics, you really need to clean your brush because that's the stuff that can get stuck in there. So we started with this corner piece, which we were working on yesterday. Yesterday we did all these little masonry pillar bits around the base. So those are done. Today we did these ties in this nice dark burgundy red. Looks fantastic. So that's great. But we didn't stop there. Then we did all the brown, or most of the brown, on this little tiny piece here. And then we started in on these pointy bits on this piece. The sort of clock face stuff. So this just has a little bit of work to do. I'll finish that tomorrow, the base coat at least. We applied a little bit of brown to this one, just because we had extra brown and we wanted to use it up. And then on this one, because we had the copper paint open, we did all of these bits here. And they look glorious. So, lots of progress today, I feel. I will be back tomorrow, hopefully. Maybe tomorrow I'll be here at 10 o'clock instead of like 10:20, if my internet will cooperate with me. Fingers crossed. But yeah, thank you ever so much to everybody who joined me. I had a terrific time. It was good to have folks in chat to chat with. And I really look forward to getting more painting done. I feel like this is a very successful experiment. I'm getting at least 2 hours of painting done every day. Actually, yesterday, there were several points during the day after I stopped streaming where I was like, I want to do some painting. I'll just sit down. But then I was like, maybe I'll wait until I can do it on stream. I don't know. I could paint off stream. I could totally finish some of these pieces. But I feel like part of the fun of it is doing it with you folks. And when I'm done, I'll have a bunch of footage of paint being done, and I can sort of edit that down into something more digestible to show off the painting in a more interesting, faster way. So maybe I'll do that too. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me. I had a really good time. I hope you folks enjoyed it, and I'll see you hopefully tomorrow at about 10 o'clock Eastern, so 10 a.m. to noon again. Bye, everybody. Be excellent to each other.